Welcome to Academic Gain Tutorials. In this video, we will look into the differences between capital expenditure and operating expenditure. Capital use is brought about when a business runs through cash, utilizes a loan or collateral, or assumes debt or obligation to purchase another resource or to increase the value of a current resource with the assumption of getting benefits for longer than a solitary fiscal year. Set forth plainly, it addresses investment in the business. On the other hand, operating expenses or operating costs are any expenses caused throughout the customary business activities and are a lot more obvious theoretically than capital costs since they are essential for everyday tasks. All operating costs are recorded on an organization's income statement as costs in the period when they were brought about. These include insurance, property taxes, utilities, licensing fees, marketing costs, cost of goods sold, research and development, salaries, administration expenses, and traveling expenses. So, let's look into the basic differences between capital expenditure and operating expenditure in a tabular form. Difference number 1. Capital expenditure is incurred to create future benefits, whereas operating expenditure is incurred for day-to-day business operations. Number 2. Capital expenditure is long-term in nature, whereas operating expenditure involves recurring expenses. Number 3. Capital expenditures are depreciated or amortized over time, whereas operating expenditures are fully deducted in the period incurred. Number 4. Examples of capital expenditure include the purchase of equipment, buildings, and technology, whereas examples of operating expenditure include payroll, marketing, and insurance. Number 5. Capital expenditures are recorded as assets on the balance sheet, whereas operating expenditures are recorded as expenses on the income statement. Number 6. Capital expenditure involves investment in income-producing property, whereas operating expenditure is related to the maintenance and operation of income-producing property. Number 7. Capital expenditures are infrequent and substantial, whereas operating expenditures are frequent and routine. Number 8. Decision-making for capital expenditure often involves extensive planning and a procurement process, whereas operating expenditure follows a regular procurement process with minimal planning. Number 9. The tax treatment of capital expenditure spreads the cost over the useful life of the asset, whereas operating expenditure is deducted in the same period it is incurred. And finally, difference number 10, capital expenditure is also known as capital expense or capital expenditure, whereas operating expenditure is also known as operating expense, revenue expenditure, or operating expenditure. So, these are the differences between capital expenditure and operating expenditure. If this lecture was helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Thank you.